as soon as I'm done with my intro. All right.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you all for coming today. This is the IGIC March Lunch and Learn, our monthly series, at least it has been, for learning and information sharing. Your usual host, Micah Cutler, had her day job interfere with this awesome event, and so she appointed me. Lucky you. I'm Robin McNeely. I work at Iowa State University, the GIS lab manager there for about 20 years now. And I've been a part of IGIC for a long time, at least that long. Just so all of you know, Josh will be recording this for those folks who maybe want to go back and review or who couldn't make it, like Micah. And Josh will also be controlling the sharing for the presenters. So I'm sure that will go smoothly. We're going to have a panel approach today to cover Introduction to Pro. I'm sure all of you who have used it or would like to use it are interested in hearing the stuff we've learned, some pros and cons. We're going to cover some licensing, symbology, adding data, some basics to get you all going. And my plan is to have each presenter introduce themselves, maybe how long they've been using Pro, just as a short getting to know you, and then they'll show their information. So some comments at the end, but we'll wait till that happens. And if you have questions, put them in the chat. I'll be watching, or at the end I'll chat. So on to you, Nicole. Take it away.
All right. Thanks, Robin.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So we're good. Everybody can see this?
Sure can.
All right. So my name is Nicole Skippers. I am the GIS coordinator at Marion County. I've actually been in this position for about 7 months. Prior to that, I actually worked in development at Esri in Redlands, California for just over 6 years. So my experience with Pro actually started when Pro was still in its first development cycle, and I was testing out licensing between it and Enterprise. So I will have probably the least exciting part of this presentation. The others are going to show you some cool stuff. But there's a couple things we want to note. As some of you may know, 10.8.1 is the last release of ArcMap. This means that in March of 2026, it will be retired. So there's no support available for it after that time period. I did want to note in March of 2024, it enters mature support, which means that there's no software updates, patches, or hot fixes. So this is the product lifecycle that Esri has. If you're not familiar with it, I did put the link here in the slide. I don't know if we share the slides out, but if anybody wants it, they can reach out. Some things to know about Pro before getting started with it. So Pro can be installed next to ArcMap. So when you're looking at switching anybody from ArcMap to Pro, they can actually run side by side. This way, as they're getting comfortable with Pro, they can go back and look at how they did it in ArcMap. The default location for where projects are stored is under the user's My Documents, ArcGIS and Projects. This can be a little confusing. You can change this when you're saving, but by default, this is where they're going to land. You can import MXD or MPK files into Pro. This is going to be demoed later. However, the reverse is not true. So Pro does not have backward support for ArcMap, so a project cannot be converted into an MXD. I put a good link here from Esri, and this is some quick start tutorials that they have that are available. I think this is a good place to start looking. If you've never used Pro before, it'll walk you through creating projects, opening Pro, all of that. For our statistics fans, it's good to know that Pro has built-in support with R. So this is known as the ArcGIS bridge. So if you're looking to deep dive into some of that, we're not going to talk about it today, but just search for that and you will find all kinds of documentation on it. We wanted to talk about some terms. So overall, many things between ArcMap and Pro are similar, but there's a couple terms that are different. So the first one is project. Right now, we're used to saying map documents or MXD files. In Pro, the term is a project. So these are stored as an APRX. This contains all of your maps, scenes, layouts, data, tables, tools, all of it. It also has an associated geodatabase and toolbox. Ribbon, for anybody who's comfortable with Microsoft products, Word, Outlook, they are all ribbon applications. This is where at the top you have all of those nice tabs and it looks very new. One of the neat things is as you select a different item, a different feature layer maybe, different tabs will show up in that ribbon that are specific to what you're looking to edit or work on. Pane, these are the dockable windows. So this is like your contents or your catalog. Views, so views is the common thing. So these are really the maps. Each map is presented in a view and there can be multiple views, which really means multiple maps in one Pro project. Only one view is active at a time, but you can switch which one is activated very quickly. Templates, you either love them or you don't, but they're pretty nifty. They are a customized starting state for a project. So what does this mean? Say you want standardized layouts or standardized data connections or folder connections or backgrounds. Maybe you do 2D and 3D at the same time. Well, you can set a template and anybody who's opening their Pro can access those templates and then it's standardized throughout the organization. Pros and cons. So you'll see the first thing in both of these is that it is not ArcMap. That is both a pro and a con. It can be scary to transition over to Pro when you've been using ArcMap for a long time. You're very comfortable, but it's also not ArcMap, which means it looks newer, it moves faster. You know, one of the other pros we have listed is it crashes and freezes, we'll say less often. Some have not had it crash or freeze on them, some have. A big thing to note about Pro as it stands right now is for anybody who uses AgLand or GeoGear, there is no support for either of those in Pro yet. MDBs are not supported, so if you've been using those, you cannot connect to them in Pro. And you cannot connect to the root of a drive. So when you make a connection, some folks, myself included, will connect directly to a C drive, maybe a D drive. You can't do that in Pro. You have to connect directly to a folder. Some of the really cool things about Pro, it's all in one. So right now, if you want to do 3D or go to your catalog, those are all separate applications installed on your system. In Pro, they're all in one, which means it's one application. It's got catalog, it's got scene, it's got ArcGlobe, all in one location. It's a 64-bit application. For those GIS folks, that might not mean too much. For those on the IT side, that's a big deal. It means that Pro can use all of the resources on your system, so it can respond faster depending on how much resources you have assigned to it. We talked about that it's ribbon-based. This is really nice and easy. A great feature is Autosave. ArcMap does not have this. I'm sure we've all experienced it. You got in the zone, you were working for 2 hours, ArcMap crashes, and you've lost everything you've done. In Pro, you can set an autosave and tell it to save maybe every 10 minutes on closing Pro. There's all kinds of different things that you can set up for that. So instead of losing 2 hours worth of work, you only lose 10 minutes. Multiple maps in one project is awesome. It kind of cleans up your folders a little bit. Instead of having 20 MXD files, you now have one Pro project that contains 20 maps. Multiple layouts. If you've been working on one map and you need it in a big poster size, maybe you need it in a small handout, all types of different layouts, Before in ArcMap, you would have to have multiple MXD files with different layouts in them. Well, in Pro, all of those layouts can be in one project. Editing is simplified. Right now, in order to edit in ArcMap, you have to start an editing session, stop an editing session. In Pro, editing is always on. You just have to select the editing tab. It has a dark theme. This is a big item for me personally. All of my Outlook, all of that is set to a dark theme. Sit staring at screens. I like getting rid of some of the bright whites if I can. It has a much improved integration with ArcGIS Online and Portal. As Esri moves forward, this is a big push they're making to use, the WebGIS integration, and this is much, much better in Pro than it is in ArcMap. And then we talked about project templates and what those are. And that was really all that I had.
Thank you, Nicole. Our next presenter will be Josh.
Yep.
There we go.
Hi, Josh Obrecht. I am a GIS analyst also at Iowa State, working with Robin. Been dabbling in and out of Pro for a couple years now, and so what I'm going to discuss with you is some licensing issues. And I do know that Esri is on here, and they may, or a couple from Esri are on here, and they may not quite like what I'm about to say about licensing. So, everybody is familiar with licensing ArcGIS Pro via the named user option. That is what Esri is pushing towards, and in order to do that, you need an ArcGIS Online organization, and you can set up the licensing through there. As we can see here, this is our Iowa State one. User types, ours is set with GIS Professional Advanced. That automatically gives all of our users the license for ArcGIS Pro. And one of the things that you can do is for any new member that joins your organization, you can set it up so that all the extensions are already set for each user. And then some bundles and applications and stuff like that. But the key thing here is enabling all the extensions for a person to use the named user license for Pro. So first off, this is what the dark theme looks like that Nicole mentioned. And so licensing, if you're using the named user, it's going to say so here, shows the extensions. One thing about using the named user license is that what you may want to also do is, I don't remember exactly where it's at right now, but is to not allow it to use the license to work offline. If somebody takes the license offline onto a computer, it is forces the person to use that computer strictly. So if they wanted to log in on another computer with the named user license, they would not be able to. And it is a pain to help to revert that if they do not have access to that other computer.
Looks like the box is right there under settings, Josh.
Well, I
Unchecked
don't think
right
it's
now.
that. I think there's a setting in that you can set within
AGO.
within AGO that doesn't allow it.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so named user license. However, like ArcGIS Desktop, ArcMap, you can also set up single use and concurrent licenses. We find, at least here, that those work a lot better than the named user license. One reason is named user license needs internet connection to hit ArcGIS Online in order to get the license. Now, concurrent license, yes, you do also need that. However, if you are working in an office setting and you have a license server available, then you don't really have to worry about that because most likely you're connected to the same network, and so it's a constant connection. As we can see here, I can change it to concurrent use license, and this will pop up with what our license server is that we currently have licenses set up on. By default, it doesn't license extensions, so you would have to go ahead and license yourself for the extensions once it's done thinking. Then also what we have found, especially during this pandemic, is that the single-use license works out wonderfully because that doesn't need any network connection whatsoever. It uses a license file that, just like you did with desktop, the extensions automatically come licensed with it because you create that license file in MyEsri. And so that is what we have found, especially with people working at home, that we just provide them with the license and they can go ahead and run the software at home. All right. And I think that is all I've got for just a couple little tidbits on licensing and what there is available. So I believe Brad is next.
I think I am next. Thanks, Josh. So I was Nicole and Josh, they got to talk about kind of some of the behind the scenes stuff. I drew the straw of talking a little bit about kind of the migration of, let me share this here real quick, talking about the migration of bringing in an existing project from ArcMap and bringing that into Pro and kind of the steps to do that. So in the survey that was sent out, we saw that there were some pretty straightforward and simplistic and basic tasks. So that's what we're going to try and hit on here. Obviously, as time goes on and interest is there, we can always take that to the next intermediate or the Pro level to talk about Pro. So a little bit of myself. I work for the Iowa Department of Transportation. I'm in the Traffic and Safety Bureau. I've been doing GIS there for a few years now. My journey with Pro started, it was probably 4 years ago, maybe, whenever it first came out. And I, like a lot of users, was pretty hesitant about how I wanted to get started with this. I was, an old guy, didn't want to switch over that easy. But I eventually told myself I was going to start with a single project, maybe a workflow, work through that, and see how it went. And I stayed that way for a while. Eventually got to the point where I was probably doing half of my work, switching between Pro and ArcMap. Eventually worked my way up to where everything new was Pro, just going back in case of a pinch to go into ArcMap to find something. So now I would say, from my experience, going back into ArcMap, getting ready for a demo for this, when I was asked to do some of this demo, was probably the first time I've touched ArcMap in months, probably. So speaking a little bit, my workflow, with things, I'm not necessarily tied into a lot of the extensions that maybe some of the users are, or some of those other products that would require me to stay with ArcMap. So I had that freedom to go ahead and jump in whenever I was ready to start using Pro. So that was a nice thing to have. My biggest issue now in terms of going back to ArcMap deals with when we have new student interns that start working at the DOT. A lot of their experience at the university level that I've found so far has been, yes, they've had some experience with ArcGIS Online, and any of their desktop experiences has mostly been centered around ArcMap. And so we try and get them up to speed with ArcMap first, kind of plant those basics, make sure we're all on the same page, and then we'll migrate them and say, look, if you're going to be working with stuff, Pro is kind of where we prefer to have things, just because that's the direction it's going. Okay, so a little bit about the workflow. Like I said, I'm going to try and keep it pretty simple here. I had to go back and try and find a map document to bring over just to try and work folks through that simplistic workflow. So I found one here, a map that I had worked on several years ago with our traffic control device applications. you know, I've got some interchange locations in there and some road network just to try and give people an idea as to you know, some of the layers and some of the different things that maybe we need to clean up as we migrate from ArcMap to ArcPro. So as I zoom in on an area here, hopefully those labels will go. I'll try and take care of some of that cleanup just to kind of show people where some of those buttons or where you can find some of that functionality as we move over to Pro. So it's a little busy with some of the road markers, road shields here, but I'll show you how we kind of to try and clean that up in Pro. Now as I switch over to Pro, I'm going to start with one of those blank templates here if it's showing up. Let's do a new one here. Live demo. So I'm going to run through a couple of steps. One, I'm going to take that existing ArcMap document that was there. I'm going to import it, and then I'm going to run through basically some of the basics of where to find some of the symbology options and some of the labeling options to give people an idea. So now that Pro started, I'm going to go ahead and start without a template and do that. Blank map, and then I will say, once we're here, I'm going to go up here along this ribbon that Nicole talked about, and I'm just going to say I want to go ahead and import a map. I click on that. I'm going to find the map that I want to import, that MXD of TCD applications. We'll bring that in. You know, depending on the complexity of some of your map documents, that may take a little bit of time. This is pretty simple, straightforward, as you saw. So it should, at least in my testing, it went pretty quick. So we'll let that import. So one thing that I didn't have back in the original MXD that I went in real quick and did is I didn't have a layout. I went and created one last night just so we have one to show that example. Here was the map layout for this MXD. And if I go back into the Pro that I just imported, right, it brings in the data frame view itself. If I look at my catalog over here, we'll see that it imported both that map that we have, but it also brought over that associated layout. So if I go ahead and open that up, you'll see it does a pretty good job of keeping things fairly clean in terms of bringing over the legend. I noticed some of the dynamic text that associated with that old previous MXD didn't quite come over right, but that's a fairly easy and straightforward cleanup. So we'll have your different data frames. Those will import here. Nicole mentioned we can have multiple data frames now in this ArcPro project, multiple layouts, those kind of things. This one's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, just a single map, data frame, and a single layout. Okay, let's switch back over here to the map itself. Just to show you, kind of work through one of the things that I tried to do was some of the styling that we had with old MXD. So the other thing I want to try and bring along as well would be an old style that I had for an ArcMap document. So if I go down here in our catalog view and I go ahead and import a style, we're going to bring that over, bring in that traffic and safety style. And now that I've brought those in, you can see I've got these, in this case, it's just a bunch of point features for different mapping projects. So now those are available to change, and they're in the gallery for this project, so I can use that for symbolizing in this data frame. So we're gonna do that. Just an example, if I go ahead, one nice thing, it also brings over some of the bookmarks that are associated with it. So if you had bookmarks set up in your old ArcMap document, those will come forward with you as well. In this case, simply put, you'll notice the ribbon up here, right? We're on the map view, but as soon as I go and click on one of these feature layers in our table of contents, you'll notice that the ribbon bar changes, and now we have this feature label or feature layer options up here where we can change both the appearance, the labeling, and data views. So that's one way you can go in, and if you want to change the symbology of what you brought in or what you're starting from new. The other way that's simply also quicker, if I go into my table of contents and I just click on the symbol, you'll notice over here this pane is going to change, and I can just quickly jump in here and find what I want to change it to. So I'm just going to go ahead and change it to another option to change that question mark to just an O, just as an example. If you want to go in and further change it from that, it's something you brought over, maybe your symbology that you didn't like. If I go to our properties here, we can come in and change the properties for that symbology item here. We can see it's a multi layered feature. We can change the colors, the size, all the point symbols, those kind of things. You do that here under the properties of that feature. Okay, so that's the first thing. Brought over the map, changed some of the styles, imported our style file with it. The other thing I want to do is, you can notice that for the labeling aspect of it, the old MXD that I had, I think it was just using the standard label engine. In this Pro document, I'm going to want to use the Maplex labeling option. I think I had heard someplace that when you bring those over from the old MXDs into the Pro, it's automatically going to convert that over to the Maplex labeling engine anyway. So that does provide some nice opportunities for some label customization. So what I'm going to do, I want to change some of these road shields. So I'm going to go down here to the road network that we have. You can kind of see the symbology, but also up here, you can go up here to the labeling inside that tab. Notice some of these options under here, you can change it. Or once again, in the table of contents, if I right click and I go to the labeling properties, it's going to bring me over here to some of the options. So I've got different labeling classes depending on the type of road we're dealing with, right? Whether it's an interstate, a US highway, an Iowa highway. And then you can also come in and change the actual symbol, the road shield that we're dealing with, or some of the positioning. So the first thing I want to do would be under here, under the, even below this, inside the label class, there's the conflict resolution option. So in this case, for the US highways, I want to come in and say, I want to remove my duplicate layers. So in this case, I want to change it and maybe make it every 2,000 map units, right? Which would be meters in this case. You can see now that those labels have switched out. So a lot of those same options that you would have seen in the MXD and the ArcMap document, where you kind of had to bring up the layer properties, go to the labeling, burrow down into the placement options or the spacing, those kind of things. In this panel, they're much quicker and easier to get to. It's there. The nice thing is the contextual ribbons will kind of show up for you depending on if you're working with the map document itself, if you're dealing with the layer properties, those kind of things. So really what I found as I've gone through it, you just start poking and prodding. And I think Esri's done a good job of in those context menus, getting you quicker with fewer clicks than what you had back in ArcMap. The last thing I'll mention, I didn't notice it, or I didn't mention it back in the map document, but any of that documentation you might have done for your data frame or your data layers, they're going to be over here with our data frame properties, right? If we want to look at the view the metadata, it's going to bring over the summary that you would have filled out in your previous document, so you're bringing that forward with you as well. So I think those are the big items that we wanted to show for this area that I was talking about. So importing that map document, importing the style that we had from ArcMap, some of the basics of changing the symbology, and then changing the labeling as well. So I think that's all I have, Robin. So I will stop sharing and turn it back over to you, or on to Penny, whichever way we're going.
Okay. And that was also what Micah was going to share. So that's your total.
It was, yep.
Everything.
Yep, she was
okay.
going to handle. She was going to handle the importing, and then I was going to handle the other stuff. So yep, that should be good.
Okay. Alrighty then. Yes, on to Penny.
Okay. You can see my screen, I presume.
You presume correctly.
I have here a simple ArcGIS Pro map, and you're seeing mine in in not the dark view, which is nice, kinder on some of the soldier eyes, let me tell you. The things I wanted to talk about today, a little about me. I am GIS coordinator for Boone County, Iowa. I've been here a little over 5.5 years now about. And I started learning Pro like Brad did, started with one project. I needed a new map. I was going to make it in Pro. Forced myself to learn it little by little, and I've been doing that ever since. Somewhere between a year and 2 years now. So I have a nice mix of MXD and Pro projects. I have not gone completely over because I do use some of the Schneider tools that aren't ready yet. And but once everything is ready for Pro, I'm going completely over, and my arc maps are going away entirely. Okay, we're going to talk database connections now. You've been talking the map tab with most people so far. Well, over here we have an insert tab, and on that insert tab, connections, and I can add all kinds of connections to this map. And so if I want to add a new database connection, I click on this one, pops up what kind of platform. My internet's a little slow up here too, by the way. And these are my options. And the instance and what kind of authentication you want to use, what database you have on that server. And then you just hit OK, and it adds that database connection. You can also add in folders is really simple as well. You can do in your PC, your computer, everything you've got on there shows up, and you can just drill down to a folder where you have something database related, a layer or something that you want to add on to there. And it's simple procedure. Adding data to your layer, back on the map tab, where we have all kinds of different things here. Adding data looks just the same it did on your ArcMap. Click on that little plus sign. And now these are the databases and folders that I have added to this project. And so if you want to add data from a database, then you pick your item. Very similar to ArcMap. You just have to find, once you find this button, you're good to go. You'll have no problem whatsoever from there. Other things that you can add in your insert tab, you can add a new map. So this is what the organization for Pro is going to be so nice for me, because I will have, say for my emergency management guy, I'll have all these different MXDs, different maps, different sizes of maps. I have my city for 8.511. I have it for printing a 2-foot square map. All of those can be handled in one project in just tabs. So if I wanted to add a new map, click here, new map. It shows up here, and you can start adding data to it, naming your map. It's always a good idea. You don't want all your tabs named map, so it's a simple double click, and don't name it new map either. Put something. You all know these things. Something where you can recognize what it is when you see it. And then we could start adding connections and data and things to this map. This cool feature is layout. Look at that. So if I want to add a large one, now I've set the size on this layout. I haven't had to go through all that process of setting it on ArcMap, or when you're trying to export it or trying to print it, and all those configuration settings. It's as simple as this. Now, map frame. This one is also really nice. Let's say I want to add my school election map into here, and I can just do a little rectangle, and I've got it there. I can add a different layout, a different map frame. As simple as that. I can hear your applause now. So layout has gotten way easier as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about publishing. So I'll go back to the first map. And to publish, I have the option. I'm logged into my ArcGIS Enterprise account here, but I can also switch and go to my ArcGIS Online account. So I could publish to either one of those with a simple switch. To publish, that's a share. We have lots of options for publishing. You can publish a web map, which will have all your layout and your labeling and symbology and all that stuff. Or if you just want to add some layers, I want to put a new layer out that I can use in all my existing ArcGIS maps, or create a new map from it with other, in combination with other layers that I have already out on ArcGIS. So those are two options. Let's say I want to do a new web layer here. And replacing will update. And it doesn't exactly update, it replaces the existing with a brand new. So your symbology and things are going to change. So you need to watch that a little bit. Whether you replace them, there are ways to update a map, but it's really not as necessary as with, I'm using Portal. With Portal, I don't have to update the way I do with ArcGIS Online. Now, again, you need a summary and you need tags. Those are required. Here's what my favorite thing about Portal is that I can reference the registered data in my database. So my web maps and apps on Portal are always looking at up-to-date data, and I don't have to do any updating. They're pulling that data directly from the database. So this is what I would do. You can also copy your data if you want. And so then you have a static map out there. And there are instances where you're going to want to do that. You choose the location. These are the folders that I have on my enterprise. And I can choose which folder I want to store it in here. And then, of course, the analyze is just like it was with ArcMap. We get some new fun features, fun errors here, and working your way through those is just the same as it was when you're publishing from your ArcMap. And then hit the publish button and away you go. There's also some configuration options. And I've usually, if I hit this page, I spend time on Esri's help pages and read through what things are to see, do I want to do that? But there are some really nice advanced options. Okay, that's about all I want to talk about on publishing. I think we have a little time left here, and we're going to want to take, oh, let's see, Server Manager. If you have Enterprise, and I know that most of you probably do not, if you're going to add a location, a database, a folder on your map, and you want to publish it, you're going to have it also set up in your Server Manager. So that is the Site tab, Data Stores, and you can see that I have registered my AppSQL1. I've registered lookup tables that Eric is pulling from database, like our solutions database for me. And to register, you choose what you're registering here. I've registered folders where I have some information that I want to add to a map and publish it out to one of my either ArcGIS Online or Portal. The way I'm functioning is I am generally publishing any public data and field data collection right now to ArcGIS Online. We have to update our Portal to whatever the latest version is before I can use things like quick capture and workforce and the ArcGIS Online or the field data collection. Before I can use that in my Portal, I need to upgrade, and we haven't got that done yet. So I'm doing all that and public information in ArcGIS Online, and Portal is strictly internal. I have web maps up for all of my maps and apps that I've created for my various departments. These are replacing their desktop ArcGIS Online or ArcMap, the desktop ArcMaps are being replaced by these. One of the cool features is I have a pictometry widget. Oh, and they really enjoy the ability to set their base map rather than having to publish a map that you consume in Collector that has a set base map. Here they can choose whatever base map they want to look at. This is my favorite new widget. Again, I'm running off of a Wi-Fi, a MiFi. But this is my pictometry widget, which is fabulous when it catches up. Too many clicks here. But it pops pictometry up. I can put it in any app that I want. And again, I'm replacing desktop applications. Those who don't need any software or add-ons that aren't available right now in Pro and Portal, they don't use ArcMap at all anymore. They still have a license. I'm ditching them when our sign up period, what is it, end of June. I'll be ditching a lot of our ArcMap licenses because those people don't even open it anymore. Once they got a Portal web map that was replacing their ArcMap, these are a lot faster. They don't crash. I mean, they just come open. ArcMap can take 5 or 10 minutes depending on what they've got set up on their map and how it displays. It can take quite a while to come up in the morning. This is just here, and they really enjoy a lot of search capabilities.
I have a question on your the pictometry, the widget there. Is that something that you get when you get pictometry imagery, or is that available to anyone who may have access to pictometry somewhere else?
No, this is from pictometry itself.
Okay.
This is a one-time fee, no annual maintenance purchase from pictometry or EagleView now, I guess they are. Cost me $900, I think, and I can use it lifetime license as many apps as I want to. So I thought that was a great deal. And our assessors often had either pictometry within their ArcMap, or they had a separate pictometry display that they were using. And this has combined the two of them, and they don't need two tools open at one time anymore.
Mm-hmm. And that license is for your whole organization or for each?
No, for the whole organization.
Okay.
Anybody who has creating the capabilities to create an app can use that license.
Nice.
Which is me.
Mm-hmm.
But you would have a lot more people who would be creating apps, I presume. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I have to share. If anybody has any questions, I think we should probably go into question and answer time.
Yeah, we should. I haven't seen anything new come up in the chat lately, but maybe people were waiting for the presentations to end to do that. If you have been, put something in the chat now. I'm going to share. Oh, wait, something just popped up. Whoa, okay, people. Is there a recommended limit on how many maps and layouts can be saved inside a single Pro workbook, which would be a project, or a recommended limit on how many tabs should be? I don't know if there is a max. There could be. I haven't run into that yet, but then again, I haven't gone over about 20 tabs. Has anyone heard an upper limit? Okay, I guess one way to find out would be to try it, or I suppose to Google it. Second question is there a way to include two synced layout views on top of each other?
I believe there is. I believe you can have side by side where they're geosynced and they move in conjunction with each other, but I think you can also grade them.
That's a good question that I haven't tried to make that work. That might be a good one to look into for the next.
I
if we
actually
do
do
a
something similar
Advanced
with,
Pro.
yeah, I do something similar where I have a set of base map layers for the county, and then I pull those into a map, and then I pull into some custom layers that just the assessor's office or the auditor's office or whoever needs. And since I pulled them in separately from their, they have separate headings, and I could turn one off and on. The the entire group of layers can be turned on and off individually. So that might be sort of the same.
I'm not sure if that's exactly what she was getting at, but I'm not quite sure. On the reference I just made to the next potential lunch and learn that's possibly more pro advanced topics, we were looking at maybe doing editing, options, some advanced labeling. If that happens, IGIC list will obviously get a notice about which lunch and learn that would be. If anyone out there has ideas for things that weren't covered here that are bothering you, that might be more advanced pro, you can send them in the chat now if you think of them, or put them in one of the for the education committee, or email. Could be me, could be Micah, whoever you think would make more sense. I put information on the April Lunch and Learn in the chat. It'll be ESRI field maps by Chase Fisher, who works for ESRI. That will be, I think, a very good intro to the new Collector Plus, and lots of features that I know I would definitely want to see. Two other things I want to be sure I cover while we're waiting for more questions to possibly come in are the user conference. The ESRI user conference is going to be will be virtual and free again this year for everyone who has an up-to-date maintained license. The link is in the chat now. Always a good thing to take advantage of, and especially since we wouldn't necessarily have to fly to California, although that's not a bad thing. It's definitely much more accessible now. Last thing I want to mention is, I'm going to put this in the chat too. All of you probably realize ITAG is coming up. It's our conference, annual conference that is a combination of IGIC, us, and ICIT, also some of us. It will be in person this year, second week in June, like the 13, 14, 15, 16, somewhere in there. Helps if I actually hit the enter button. There you go, the 15th through the 18th. I looked yesterday, and you can go through registration, but I noticed that workshops aren't listed, and I've heard that they'll be getting updated information on that site here soon. But I wanted to share this because I know we're having this talk today. Again, in person, which will be good to get together, and hopefully some of those workshops will be of interest to people. And I know that there will be the migrating to Pro workshop that we had a couple years ago that probably will be of relevance to more people now. Okay, I'm not seeing more questions in the chat yet.
There's one question that's kind of in between your links, so but I could take care of it.
Oh, gotcha. What version of Python?
Yeah.
Yes.
So so Pro uses Python 3. Whatever. I'm not sure exactly which one it is. That is different from ArcGIS Desktop, which uses 2.7, which also technically isn't supported by the Python people anymore even. So that is one thing that if you have scripts and tools that you have built for desktop, they may possibly not work in Pro because there are some syntax changes with Python 3. There is a way from within Pro to check your previous scripts and tools. I have found it easiest to just go ahead and run the tool in Pro and see if it breaks. I've had tools that broke and then I could see where the error is and then I know what I need to change. I've had tools where I thought they would break and they didn't. So that would be some considerations when trying to deal with Python between the two.
Excellent. I'll wait just a few more seconds to see if someone comes up with something else on their mind. And just reiterate that the next Lunch and Learn is April 14th, but I know Micah will be sending out emails to remind us to the IGIC list with connection info and a short agenda for what Chase will be covering within field maps. Probably a week or two before that happens. Okay, not seeing anything else in the chat. Looks like you all get a few minutes back, 7 or 8 minutes back. Thank you all for coming today, and I hope you've learned something new that will help you move on to Pro or maybe do Pro better. If you have any other topic ideas, to email those. You're welcome. And that will be that. Thank you all for coming.